All right, I think we're gonna get started now. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited that you're all here. Welcome and the 5 keys to always nailing your campaigns, even when things go a little haywire in post-pandemic pandemonium. Now, just a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Lisa Firestein. I am a marketer just like you here at Welcome, and it is very nice to meet you all, even though we're not meeting in person. And of course, I'd like to introduce you very briefly to Welcome. We are that one workspace designed specifically for marketers. We help marketers do all their work, and you might already know this. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We won't touch on it right now. And we also won't talk too much about 2020. You already know how crazy the past year was. You know that already. And it's April now. We're in a new year. And the biggest update to this year is arguably vaccines. So really quickly, I want to know from you, just a quick show of hands. If you could type your answer in the chat, I would love to hear from you guys. Who got their shot? I want to know who here is vaccinated, who's still waiting for their vaccine. Yeah, okay, so I see a bunch of raised hands. I got my Johnson & Johnson, and I don't know if any of you guys got that, but man, it knocked me out. Me and my husband, we were like crawling on the floor together at the same time. It was absolutely horrible. But anyway, now that more of us are getting vaccinated, COVID is getting closer and closer to being over, but the COVID-induced chaos isn't. Now, chaos might be a little bit dramatic, but we know this because we talk to marketers all the time. We do a ton of surveys. We actually regularly partner up with Sirkin Research, and if you're not familiar with them, they are absolute survey wizards. And in our last survey, which we completed at the end of March, we asked marketers, how are you faring right now compared to how you were doing throughout 2020? And just to be clear, it's not all bad news. 46% of marketers say that their team's productivity has improved. 24% say their professional relationships became stronger overall, and 28% say that the sense of trust really grew among their team members. But in spite of all of this, marketers are still struggling with certain uncertainties. For example, the uncertain future of remote work. Now that we've gotten the vaccine, the remote work debate is heating up. Now, again, I'd love to hear from you guys just really quickly in the chat. Who here expects to stay remote this year? Do you think you'll be going back to the office anytime soon, maybe in 2022? Or do you think that this year is just going to be remote? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the chat. Let's see. Oh, some people are doing hybrid. That's interesting. Remote forever, till the end of the year, half in office. Okay, so there's like a lot of variety here. Some of us are definitely hoping to stay remote forever. Okay, so it's a little bit mixed here. All right, and this is somewhat reflective, I think, of what we heard from marketers. Just over half of the marketers we talked to, so 54%, they expect 70% of the marketing workforce to stay remote through 2021. So marketers are probably not going anywhere. We're staying remote. All right, that's cheesy. I don't know if that joke landed. But that doesn't change the fact that overall in the world, the great remote work debate has almost become like more polarizing than politics. There are CEOs like the CEO of Goldman Sachs, David Solomon. He is just one CEO who is absolutely not a fan of remote work. He calls it an aberration, and he's insisting everybody come back to the office as soon as possible. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there are also brands like Twitter and Facebook and Spotify who are seizing headlines for allowing their employees to work remotely forever. They're making this a permanent option. But even in spite of that, in spite of marketers being generally pretty sure that they're staying remote, we're also divided among ourselves. There is a great remote work debate among marketers as well. Some people are absolutely a fan of it, as we just saw in the chat. One person says, my team has adapted pretty well, and I anticipate that it's going to be a challenge to get us to come back to the office. Other people say that they love how it's allowed them to find talent all over the world. One person is super enthusiastic, using 3 exclamation points. Working from home is fantastic, and I hope it continues forever. But on the other hand, there are issues around focusing with all the Zoom meetings, and it's just tough to stay focused when you're working remotely. And one person has absolutely not been a fan of remote work, and they are very insistent that everyone will be heading back to the office in Q4. But, this isn't just about the future of remote work. In many ways, we don't know where we'll be. And this isn't just, again, about where we'll physically be working from, but also where our organization will be in terms of success. We're not sure where we'll have to focus our attention and our priorities next. And this has been a huge issue for marketers. 65% of marketers say that it's the frequently shifting priorities that is their number one challenge. And so this is giving us priority whiplash, because there's so much we don't know. We don't know what to focus on. Even on a week-to-week basis, sometimes things are going back and forth. And when we think we know, we really don't know. And we don't know so much. We don't even know how many shots we're going to need exactly. We're not sure when we're going to get our 3rd vaccine shot, if we need one. And this, is something that has been reflected in this general sense of insecurity that marketers are feeling. We don't feel secure, and this is especially clear in the lack of job security that we're feeling. 38% of marketers we surveyed told us that they're feeling a lower sense of job security now in 2021 than they did in 2020. And this is also reflected in what marketers said to us when we were surveying them. They said, there's uncertainty about job security, even for marketers who are working at companies that are doing pretty well right now. Uncertainty dominates everything. Any sense of psychological safety we had in the workplace is gone. And it's not just about job security. It's about wondering whether you'll have what you need to pull off your next campaign. There's this one quote from one of our respondents: "We have done more work with less money, but now that's the expectation, and less help is given to marketing overall." So we're going to go into 5 key ways our marketing team has been staying sane this year, in part because we're using our own platform, Welcome. As we like to say internally, we drink our own champagne. And these are tips to help you essentially vaccinate your organization against this priority whiplash by injecting your team with systems designed to help you respond to change and maintain a healthy marketing organization. So no matter what comes your way, no matter where you're all working from, whether that's working from home, from an office, from a pool, from a tree somewhere, you'll be prepared and not scared for whatever comes your way. So without further ado, let's dive in. So the first key to nailing your campaigns, even when things go a little crazy, is to get an MRI. And we are not talking about the medical kind of MRI, although it does involve a self-scan of yourself, of your organization. In this case, MRI stands for Meeting Replacement Initiative. So meetings, like the future of remote work, like the state of remote work, can also be polarizing. They're both loved and despised by all the marketers we've talked to. I'm sure you can all relate to this. On the one hand, it's providing us with a much needed source of human interaction. So believe it or not, I've never actually met any of my colleagues from Welcome in person. So I love having meetings just to remind them that, I exist. I'm a human being, I'm a person. But on the other hand, it's really tough to respond to these shifts and priorities, to all this change, when there's no time to respond, when you're totally booked up with meetings. And you end up asking yourself, when am I supposed to work? And I think what the answer to that often is, it's often weekends, nights. And for those colleagues of yours that are doing this, you know who they are. You get those emails at midnight on a Saturday, which is not sustainable for anyone, for your team, for your organization. And so it's no wonder that 65% of marketers say that the sheer number of meetings has become much more challenging to work around. And marketers told us about this in their responses, in their own words. Regular meetings used to be 1 hour each. Now they're 30 minutes. So we get double the meetings in a day. Lunch hour is consumed by meetings. More virtual meetings, this person feels, reflect a level of insecurity and distrust at leadership, at the top from leadership. And of course, the team feels always on, which means an increase in meetings and a decrease in productive time during work hours. And you might have heard about this term that's been making the news, Zoom fatigue. This was coined by I believe, Harvard. And Zoom fatigue, if you're not familiar with it, is basically that feeling of exhaustion and burnout when you've had Zoom call on top of Zoom call. And this is actually something that they found is much worse for women. And there's a lot of reasons for this, which I won't go into. But basically, 1 in 7 women feel absolutely zapped after a Zoom call versus just 1 in 20 men. And so in response to this, there's been a trend that has emerged, Zoom bans, where companies are placing hard bans on video meetings. Citibank just announced a couple of days ago that they are introducing Zoom-free Fridays. So every Friday, you're not supposed to have any Zoom calls. There's a company here in Austin, Texas, which is actually where I am speaking to you from right now. And they instituted a ban on meetings from 10 a.m. to noon every Tuesday and Thursday, which is a little weirdly specific, but whatever. And then they even have at Clorox 1 day a month in which employees are not even allowed to use Zoom at all. And Feather is a furniture rental company in New York that even recommends that employees disable their cameras during the video chats that they do end up having. But I think that a lot of these Zoom bans, while I think, they're a good measure to take, it sometimes feels kind of like slapping a Band-Aid over the problem, right? Because it's not really addressing why you're having so many meetings that you need to cut down on in the first place. So my advice to you is not to necessarily do a ban or feel like you have to do a ban. Instead, do a scan, do an MRI, a meeting replacement initiative, scan for every project, every campaign that you're doing. And this is really just about examining your projects and figuring out what's actually necessary here. So when you do your MRI, your meeting replacement initiative scan, here are a few questions you can ask yourself. You can really analyze how many meetings do you expect to hold for this project and when? What's the point of each meeting? Is it necessary to actually make the project or campaign successful? Which ones aren't necessary? Can you afford to cut them out? And how much of the information that's going to be conveyed in this meeting do you think everybody would already be aware of? Is this just a recap? And is there any new information that could be conveyed in writing and that you don't necessarily need to have a meeting for? And the point of this is really just about awareness. It's about figuring out how to be as efficient as possible. And really just for each of your campaigns that would normally require you to meet or touch base, figure out how you could not do that via a video call. And of course, it's also about really being more intentional and deliberate with the meetings you do choose to have and keeping them tight and focused. Here at Welcome, this is a screenshot from our cultural manifesto. We call it the How We Work document. And if you actually go on our website, you can check it out. We've opened it up for the public, but we have an approach to pin down the purpose of our meetings. So we have a little exercise we do. It's a fill in the blank. We say, this meeting will be successful if, followed by a very specific answer. And we found that it really does make our meetings much more successful and more worth the time that we're taking out of our days. And what I'd also encourage you to do is encourage your team to scan themselves. This is an opportunity for your team to do a meeting replacement initiative, MRI, scan on themselves, and see if they feel like there are too many meetings and empower them to say no if they have to. And really, by doing this, you're going to give your staff, you're going to give yourself the greatest gift that you can give anybody, which is time. So whether it's for yourself or for your team, ask, is each of these meetings truly necessary? Is there something equally effective that we could replace it with? Which actually brings us to our next point, key number 2, master the art of briefing and make it easy to see what's important. And this is something that can help you with your meeting replacement initiative, because you can replace a meeting with a really solid brief. Because as we just acknowledged, not all information needs to be spoken. Lots of meetings, and I'm sure you might agree with this, lots of meetings are held to just inform people of things that, quite frankly, could just be written out. And I'm sure we can all relate to Viola right here. So not all information needs to be spoken. Here's how to write it all out. But just to keep in mind, and just to be clear, we know that you're an experienced marketer. This isn't your first rodeo. We know that you know how to write a brief. This is really just about emphasizing how much time you can save when you prioritize the brief and make it as comprehensive as possible. So just a few things that you can put in your next brief just to really make it as comprehensive and helpful for your team as it possibly can be, just including all the necessary kickoff dates, an overview of what the concept is, how it actually helps meet larger strategic goals. This is also really great for ensuring that people really prioritize this project and this campaign. What immediate next steps need to be taken, any assets that need to be created, any links to necessary resources, key responsibilities, who's responsible for fulfilling them, key milestones, launch dates, agendas for the meetings that you do deem are necessary to have. And this is really important, questions that still need to be answered, so any to be determined or open items. And this is something that we really prioritize in our software here at Welcome. So every time you open up a campaign or a task, the brief is the first tab. It's the first thing you see. And what's really great is that everyone can see the brief, you can collaborate on the brief, comment on any items. It's displayed right alongside every part of your campaign that you're going to need to have in mind. It's all grouped together. You can look at your content that you're publishing for this campaign, even the campaign budget. And what's also great is that it's right next to the workflow. So it's easy to refer to as workflows are created, and your staff can go back and forth and see how the workflow really lines up with the brief. And a great brief, just to keep in mind, a great brief alone does not make you a master of briefing. To make your brief effective, particularly when it comes to responding to change, make sure your brief is in one shared, centralized workspace, that it's fully visible, that it's something everyone can collaborate on and comment on. And again, this is really important, making sure that any key questions or open items and their answers are visible to everybody involved. And this really helps nip common sources of confusion and identify what sources of confusion are likely to arise right in the bud immediately. And it also is really important to make it clear where this project falls within the big picture of your strategy. And what's really important is that when something as major as the basic priorities behind or the priority level of a campaign suddenly needs to change, everybody knows about it. So it's really important to keep your team updated using the brief. So what I'd love to have you think about is how can briefs help your team get a firm grasp on your project's goals, clear up any misalignment, and keep up with any change that comes their way. And I'll just give you a second to think about that and have some coffee. All right. So just as important as briefing is debriefing. And so our third key to successful campaigns, even when things are going haywire, is to master the art of debriefing, or what many of us might call a marketing post-mortem. But I would love it if we could all just stop calling it that, because your past projects, campaigns, and events they aren't dead. In fact, they're very much alive. They live in your audience's brains. They probably haven't completely forgotten about that campaign. It influences how they currently perceive your brand. It likely reflects the way you currently work and get campaigns out the door, even though you did it in the past. And also, you might revive some of the assets and content that you're using for future initiatives that you're going to put forth. So have a debrief. In your debrief, evaluate how smoothly the process went, but keep in mind, again, that we're already pretty overwhelmed. And don't overwhelm yourself or your team even more than necessary with a giant, never-ending list of things to improve. Instead, focus more on reinforcing what actually worked and what's currently working for your team. So what contributed positively to the success of that campaign? And the research actually supports this approach of reinforcement. I just read a really great article from Harvard. They did a study and they called it the feedback fallacy. And what they basically found is that when you're telling people what you think of their performance or how something went, it's often more a reflection of you, your opinions, your experiences, the way you think things should be done. And really what the research shows is that, especially when we talk about abstract attributes, so strategic thinking, how fun or boring you think this presentation is right now, this is subjective. We're colorblind. But what you can measure is excellence. When a goal is accomplished, when something goes really well. And what the study found is that identifying what made something successful and reinforcing that and telling people to keep doing that, this is a lot more effective for ensuring excellence, for ensuring excellent campaigns down the line. And a great way to start a debrief, to start determining what worked, is by going through the metrics, the cold, hard numbers. So you can look at, your engagement metrics. Here at Welcome, we make it really easy to see engagement metrics, content ROI. You can connect it to your sales funnel. It's also really easy to compare and contrast to see which assets and content pieces are resonating the most. And you can also look at efficiency metrics. So you can see how and when and where your team members were their most effective and efficient. Speaking of which, when it's not necessarily an engagement metric that was extremely high or ROI that was high, but a process went really smoothly, you were able to get that campaign out the door, you can take a workflow that really works and actually copy and paste it essentially when you're setting up your next project. So it's easy to redo what works. So using debriefs, how can you focus on what worked or is working and help your team repeat their successes? All right, on to the fourth key. We're almost there. This fourth key to success, even when things are going a little wild, is to move away from overanalyzing all the little details of your campaign to prioritizing the launch and really focusing on getting your work off the ground. So let's tell a familiar story, a scenario I'm sure you'll all be able to relate to or have been able to relate to at least once. You've just created a campaign, you're all ready to go, you've got your assets, you've got your targets, you've got your budget, you're ready to spend it. Your team is about to leave the house and head to the rocket to launch the campaign. But then somebody says, hold on, wait a second. It's basically the marketing equivalent of when someone is about to leave and they realize they left their wallet in the house. Or maybe your CMO suddenly decides that actually maybe the infographic that you're going to post should look different. Maybe you should target another persona and draft up some copy for that. Maybe it should go through another round of edits. And of course, all this makes it increasingly difficult to launch campaigns when you're supposed to. And delays like these might actually be getting worse. And it might be why 38% of marketers say deploying teams and resources is more of a challenge now than it was in 2020. Governance, those final steps to make sure everything's on brand and compliant, is the #1 challenge and the #2 bottleneck that content marketers in particular face. And for all the marketers we surveyed, overall, the general content and asset creation process, so basically just the entire process, is marketers' #1 bottleneck just to getting work out the door. And this might be why a lot of the content we produce doesn't see the light of day. 60% of content produced doesn't get published where it's supposed to or published at all. So please don't be another statistic. We here at Welcome, we don't want your content to fall in that 60%. So don't prioritize perfecting the plan over focusing on the details. Prioritize getting it to market already. And one way to do this is to create a thorough yet really brief pre-launch checklist. And this is, what pilots do before they take their flight. Pilots have their pre-flight checklists. I have family members who are pilots, and I've seen those checklists. They're super thorough. They go through all the safety checks, but they don't overdo it, because at the end of the day, you can't get where you're going if you don't eventually take off. So create a thorough pre-launch checklist and shorten it as much as you can. So that really involves outlining and defining your workflow, outlining and defining what those final approvals, governance, compliance processes look like, and then shortening that as much as possible if you can. And this is also a really great way to identify which of those steps might present a holdup. And this is really important. Make sure any last-minute edits or changes that absolutely need to happen are clearly visible in one place so they can be implemented as soon as possible. And at Welcome, we prioritize visibility a lot because we've seen how this really helps us, first of all, and also other marketers get things to market faster and get more done. And this is why we have really clear workflows in Welcome. Every step is outlined. You can see which steps are coming up, which steps depend on other steps in order to be completed, and who's responsible for each of them. You can also see, what's pending, what's maybe slowing your process down, and figure out how to eliminate those barriers in the future. And we again also have, one centralized editing spot so everybody can see any last-minute changes that need to take place. Everything happens in one place. You can alert your team of edits that need to happen, and you can even pinpoint on a piece of content or an asset. You can circle it, you can put a little comment box exactly where they need to happen. And we also, have a really great version control system, so it's easy for everyone to access the latest, most up-to-date version of a piece of content. You don't have to go hunting around 10 different drives in order to figure out where the most up-to-date version is. Everything is stored in one place. And then finally, you can also build custom compliance workflows in Welcome that are automated, so you're always notified of the next steps. So having clear workflows and visibility for edits and a really straightforward, streamlined governance process, this can help you get to market faster. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to just jump, pull the trigger, whatever analogy you want to use. Granted, of course, we're not going to lie to you. There is a risk to shortening your process, to launching faster. You can make mistakes. It could be a disaster. You could pull a Burger King and tweet "women belong in the kitchen" with no context on International Women's Day. And as you can imagine, this was not received well. But remember, you're feeling closer to your colleagues now. And if you're not, maybe you want to. So after you've checked all the boxes, you've just got to trust yourself and your team. So how can streamlining your workflows and boosting visibility help you go to market faster? All right, finally, we are on our number 5, our final key to launching successful campaigns, even when things are going a little haywire. And this is to enable your entire organization. Don't lift your brand alone. So things are really tough for marketers right now. As we've established at this particular moment in time, the pressure is on. 48% of marketers say the pressure to perform has worsened in 2021. And this is probably why 61% of marketers say their stress levels and work-life balance are worse now than in 2020. And this is likely why, and one way to relieve some of this is to not make your marketers do all the campaign lifting on their own. One way to relieve some of this stress is to enable your entire organization to help your campaigns gain traction. So in other words, to loop in your other teams and have the whole company pitch in to making this campaign a success. So remember, marketing, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It might feel like it does sometimes, but it doesn't. Remember that you're part of a larger team on a broader level. Also, you all share the same goals, and hopefully you've got a great culture. Hopefully you're all friends, and friends don't let friends launch campaigns alone. Not to mention the fact that other teams, especially sales, this is really true within our company here at Welcome, especially sales, are craving your campaigns and content. They want it, they need it in order to perform. And enabling your teams, like your sales teams, is a really effective strategy. At some of the biggest companies, at Salesforce, at LinkedIn, at Google, sales reps are posting way more than marketers are, which means for you, less of a reliance on paid ads, which is great. And you also get a more personal connection with your audiences when sales reps are sharing to their connections. So a few ways you can help your entire company help you is the first step after you launch is to give your organization the tools they need to share. Keep everyone in the loop ahead of time, not just alerting your company to campaigns on the day that they launch, but sharing the launch calendar so they can see what's coming up. Make accessing and sharing assets ultra simple for everyone. Consider how different teams can share and use each campaign. Maybe you can even create different materials for different teams, and leverage integrations to make sure people have that content, they have those assets exactly where they need them. And we have a really handy calendar sharing functionality here in Welcome. It doesn't matter if someone isn't a member of the Welcome platform. You can share the calendar with anybody who needs to see it, even an external agency if you're using one. It's got everything in it: campaign durations, ongoing projects, deadlines. You can color code it so people can see which launch pertains to which campaign. And you can also see what's currently happening, what's coming up. And your colleagues and other teams can also see how busy you really are. And it's also really easy to share assets, not just during campaign time, but anytime. You could share any kind of file. What's really great also is that you can track how it's used. We've got a really handy history function so you can see how different people at your company are repurposing content and when they're repurposing it as well. We've got really advanced tagging and filtering features so you can find exactly what you need for any purpose. And we've got, of course, handy integrations. We're always adding more and more integrations. Of course, you can share your campaigns via social, but you can also share what's happening with your teams via CRM and sales tools integrations as well. So, final question. How can you empower everyone at your company, even non-marketers, and especially non-marketers, I'd say, to help amplify your campaigns? All right. So, as we've established, everything's up in the air, not just in work, but in life. It feels this way. And I think there's a really great opportunity for you to provide some grounding for your team to be a rare source of stability. And we covered a lot of ground today. We talked about having a meeting replacement initiative, embracing briefs and debriefs, prioritizing your launch, enabling your entire org to help you launch and amplify your campaigns. And each of these keys will hopefully provide some stable ways of working that will counter sudden swells of change when they arise and really keep your team ready for anything. And I really hope genuinely that everything goes well with your team, with what's going on, and I wish you the best and good luck. You can do it. So without further ado, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'll stay on the line for a couple more minutes. If you want to try Welcome for free, we actually have a free forever plan, which is really great. There's no limits on how long you can test out Welcome for. So I highly suggest you visit our website, give it a try. You can also say hi to us, reach out with any questions to our sales team. And if you want to reach out to me, you want to say hi to me, I'm pretty lonely. I haven't seen a person in a while. You can reach out to me at lisa@welcomesoftware.com. So thank you so much.